As Allied forces pushed toward Berlin in early 1945, Nazi propaganda shifted dramatically. The same bureaucracy that had administered the exploitation of foreign women now warned German women of similar treatment. Propaganda Minister Joseph Goebbels personally approved at least 14 radio broadcasts in March-April 1945, describing in lurid detail how American Negro troops would establish breeding programs with Aryan women. Reich newspapers published accounts of American rape squads supposedly operating in liberated French villages, reports fabricated by the same officials who had approved the Wehrmacht's own brothel regulations. Women in the Volkssturm, People's Militia, received specific instructions during their final training sessions. According to recovered training manuals from Berlin defense sectors, female auxiliaries were told to expect systematic degradation in American captivity. One document instructed, "The American soldier, unlike the disciplined German soldier, considers female prisoners legitimate spoils of war, as established by their treatment of Italian and French women." The irony that this precisely described German military policy remained unacknowledged. This campaign intensified as defeat neared. The Berlin Defense Authority issued 155,000 pamphlets in April 1945 with detailed survival instructions for women, including advice to appear unattractive, claim contagious diseases, and in desperate circumstances to commit suicide rather than face the American brothel system. The profound psychological manipulation prepared the ground for what would become one of the war's most unexpected revelations. American occupation directives regarding German civilians were established months before troops entered German territory. General Eisenhower's Supreme Headquarters Allied Expeditionary Force issued Order 203B in November 1944, stating, "Any soldier who commits rape, assault, or exploitation of non-combatants will face immediate court-martial with maximum penalties." This order appeared in every company operations manual, posted in barracks, and repeated in pre-deployment briefings. Soldiers' pocket guides contained specific language. "You are prohibited from entering German homes except on official business, and non-fraternization means no personal contact with German women." By June 1945, 1.6 million American troops occupied Western Germany, their behavior governed by regulations stricter than those applied in liberated Allied countries. Military police units established protected female civilian zones in each occupied city, with 24-hour patrols monitoring American movements. Lieutenant Colonel Robert Thompson, appointed military governor of Stuttgart district, instituted what became known as the Thompson Protocol, requiring 2 military police escorts for any official interaction with female civilians. His daily operations log recorded 43 soldiers disciplined for unauthorized contact with German women in the first week alone. Military records document 552 American soldiers court-martialed for violations of non-fraternization policies during the first 3 months of occupation, with 132 receiving prison sentences between 1 to 10 years for sexual misconduct. Rather than concealing these punishments, occupation authorities publicized them in German-language bulletins, demonstrating accountability previously unknown under Nazi rule. The American occupation brought unprecedented medical support for German women. The 127th Evacuation Hospital, deployed to Frankfurt, treated 1,800 German female patients in its first month of operation. Captain Elizabeth Miller, chief nurse, documented the profound disbelief among German women receiving care. They arrive expecting to be mistreated. They leave having received the same medicine, food, and dignity as our own personnel. Medical supply shipments to occupied zones included 28 tons of antiseptics, antibiotics, and gynecological supplies earmarked specifically for German women's health services. Comparative analysis of occupation zones revealed stark differences in women's experiences. While Soviet-occupied areas reported 240,000 cases of assault against German women, according to later German government studies, American zones documented fewer than 600 incidents among a population of 6.7 million women. The contrast became immediately apparent to refugees fleeing between zones. Ingrid Weber, age 24, walked 87 miles from Soviet-occupied Thuringia to reach American lines near Fulda. Her testimony, recorded by Red Cross workers, described the transformation of fear into disbelieving relief. The American soldier gave me his coat when he saw I was cold. He stayed 3 meters away at all times. He called a female translator who brought me to a women's aid station. I kept waiting for the moment when they would demand what the Russians had taken by force. But that moment never came. Occupation regulations evolved rapidly as American commanders observed German women's fear. By July 1945, General Lucius Clay, Deputy Military Governor, issued Directive 72C, establishing women's protection officers in each district, female military personnel assigned to work directly with German civilian women. These officers distributed 450,000 printed cards in German explaining rights and reporting procedures for any misconduct. The cards included a critical sentence that contradicted everything these women had been taught to expect. The United States military government guarantees your personal safety regardless of your political affiliation, past activities, or family connections. German women's psychological transition from terror to cautious trust emerged gradually through daily encounters that contradicted everything they had been led to expect. Margaret Hoffmann, a 22-year-old from Bremen, recorded her confusion in a diary recovered by historians. The American soldier posted outside our apartment building stops every male soldier who approaches. When I bring my daily water, he steps back exactly 6 feet to let me pass. I keep waiting for this to change, for the mask to drop. After 3 weeks, I'm beginning to wonder if there is no mask. This sentiment echoed across American occupied territories, documented in 1,742 personal accounts collected by the Harvard University Refugee Interview Project in 1945-46. Opinion surveys conducted in the American zone by military government officials in August 1945 revealed a stark transformation. 73% of German women reported feeling safer with American soldiers than with German civilians. This represented a complete reversal from April surveys, showing 89% of women expected mistreatment. The psychological impact of safety where violation had been guaranteed proved more effective than any propaganda campaign. Food distribution became a powerful instrument of this transformation. American occupation authorities allocated 1,550 calories daily per German civilian by September 1945, lower than American standards, but systematically delivered and significantly higher than available under final Nazi distribution. Women standing in ration lines encountered American soldiers who maintained formal distance while ensuring elderly women received assistance. The 431st Quartermaster Battalion in Munich documented distributing 840 tons of food specifically through women's aid centers during summer 1945, creating secure distribution points where no military personnel entered the interior spaces. Children became unexpected bridges between occupiers and German mothers. Lieutenant James Peterson of the 78th Infantry Division established the first candy checkpoint in Cologne, where his unit distributed 27,000 candy rations to German children in 2 months. Military photographers captured images of mothers' facial expressions, transitioning from suspicious tension to cautious gratitude. Peterson reported, "We gain the mother's trust through consistent, respectful treatment of her children. This accomplishes more than any official pronouncement." International Red Cross inspectors documented this evolving relationship in their quarterly reports. Swedish delegate Hans Levander wrote after visiting 17 American-controlled cities, "German female civilians initially report absolute certainty of impending sexual violence based on government warnings. Their psychological adjustment upon experiencing protection instead constitutes the most significant aspect of occupation dynamics. His September 1945 report detailed 82 women's aid centers established by American forces, serving approximately 2.1 million women with medical care, food supplements, and security provisions. The collapse of Nazi propaganda's final deception proved particularly powerful. Maria Schmidt, a former BDM, League of German Girls leader from Hamburg, wrote to her imprisoned husband, "Everything they told us about the Americans was a lie. The women in Russian zones suffer exactly what Goebbels said Americans would do. Here, a woman who reports harassment sees the soldier punished within hours. I cannot reconcile this reality with what we believed." Her letter, intercepted by military mail censors, was preserved in occupation records as representative of a common realization. Regulations governing American-German interactions evolved as occupation authorities recognized the psychological importance of demonstrating consistent respect. General Lucius Clay's September 1945 revision of non-fraternization rules maintained professional distance while acknowledging women's needs for predictable, respectful interaction. The order specified, military personnel will maintain formal conduct with German civilians while ensuring all interactions convey respect for human dignity regardless of nationality. For women who had been taught to expect systematic degradation, this formal protective distance provided the foundation for a profound re-evaluation of both their former leaders and their supposed enemies. American occupation authorities initiated unprecedented documentation of wartime sexual violence in late 1945, establishing the War Crimes Documentation Unit with specific focus on crimes against women. Captain Catherine Sutherland led a team of 28 female officers collecting testimonies from victims across Europe, including German women abused by their own forces. This evidence contributed to 327 prosecutions of military personnel from all combatant nations, including 87 American soldiers, establishing that sexual violence would no longer be dismissed as an inevitable consequence of conflict. The Nuremberg prosecutions included evidence from 27 forced brothels operated by German authorities, with surviving women providing testimony that transformed international legal standards. Statistical evidence confirmed the stark contrast in women's treatment across occupation zones. A confidential International Red Cross survey from December 1945 documented 1,336 cases of assault in American sectors among approximately 7.1 million female residents, a rate of 0.019%. Soviet zones reported rates 117 times higher according to hospital records, while British and French zones fell between these extremes. These statistics reflected not just military discipline, but fundamentally different approaches to civilian dignity. Major John Williams, appointed Civilian Protection Coordinator for Bavaria in October 1945, established a model program that distributed identification cards to all women in his jurisdiction, guaranteeing them right of complaint without reprisal. His units distributed 4,300 tons of food supplements specifically to households headed by women, along with 1,250 tons of medical supplies to women's clinics. Williams maintained meticulous records of every reported incident, personally reviewing each case and applying punishments that German observers described as shockingly severe by Wehrmacht standards. The American occupation unexpectedly created conditions where German-American relationships developed despite official discouragement. By December 1945, military government records noted 2,387 formal requests for marriage between American personnel and German women, relationships that developed despite initial non-fraternization rules and within strictly proper boundaries. These relationships, officially discouraged until restrictions eased in October 1945, developed through work assignments, administrative contacts, and rebuilding projects where American discipline maintained formal propriety until mutual respect evolved into deeper connections. Social programs established specifically for vulnerable German women became an occupation priority by early 1946. Women's employment initiatives created 63,000 positions with American-controlled industries, allowing women to support families independently. The Women's Assistance Fund distributed 4.7 million Deutschmarks for emergency support to widows and mothers. These programs, administered jointly with German women's committees, created collaborative relationships unimaginable months earlier, when these same women had hidden in fear of American arrival. Ursula Müller, a 31-year-old widow from Heidelberg, captured this transformation in testimony, recorded for Harvard's interview project. When Russian soldiers liberated our neighboring town, women were taken systematically. We prepared to die rather than face Americans. Then they arrived with female officers who established women's committees, guaranteed our safety, and provided food for our children. I worked as a translator for 6 months before I realized the extraordinary truth. I was safer under American occupation than I had been under our own government. This recognition broke something fundamental in my understanding of everything I had been taught. The contrast became particularly stark when German women compared notes across occupation zones. Elfriede Weber fled the Soviet zone in November 1945, crossing secretly into American territory near Hof. Her debriefing interview described systematic sexual servitude expected of attractive women by Soviet officers. Upon entering American territory, she received medical examination from a female physician, food rations without expectations, and placement in a women's shelter where male personnel were prohibited. In the Russian zone, pretty women were claimed like property, she testified. Here, they are protected most carefully. It is as though I have stepped into another world with entirely different rules of human dignity. The treatment of German women by American forces shaped German-American relations for generations beyond the occupation years. Women who had hidden from expected exploitation became crucial partners in rebuilding, with 37% of military government civilian employees being German women by 1948. Their experiences spread through family networks, creating a foundation of trust that diplomatic agreements alone could never establish. Eva Schmidt, who worked as a translator for occupation authorities in Frankfurt, later reflected, "We expected to be treated as spoils of war. Instead, we were treated with a respect that made us question everything we had been taught about both Americans and ourselves." This transformation echoed through generations. Historian Margaret Weber interviewed 147 daughters of these women for her 1985 study, Mothers of the Alliance. She documented how mothers conveyed their experiences to daughters through specific stories. The American officer who posted female MPs outside women's housing. The mess sergeant who created separate food lines to protect women from crowding. The doctor who treated German children with the same care as American dependents. These intimate narratives of unexpected protection passed between generations created an emotional foundation for political alliance that formal treaties merely codified. Statistical studies confirmed the reality behind these personal accounts. Professor Alan Thompson's comprehensive 1975 analysis of military records documented 7,394 cases of American soldiers punished for misconduct toward German women during 1945 to 1949, a remarkably low figure given the millions of interactions, but significant in demonstrating accountability. Every documented case resulted in disciplinary action, with 842 soldiers receiving prison sentences for serious violations. This accountability stood in stark contrast to previous military occupations, where victors typically enjoyed impunity. While the overall record showed remarkable restraint, historical accuracy requires acknowledging violations that did occur. Military police records documented 395 sexual assaults by American personnel during the first year of occupation. Each case resulted in court-martial, with sentences averaging 8.4 years imprisonment. Rather than concealing these violations, American authorities publicized the punishments, with German-language newspapers reporting trial outcomes. This transparency represented a revolutionary approach to military discipline and civilian protection that transformed German women's expectations. The experience of protection, rather than exploitation, directly influenced Germany's post-war political alignment. Survey data from 1947 to 1952 showed that women consistently supported Western alliance at rates 8 to 14% higher than men. Political scientist Richard Merritt's analysis concluded, the direct experience of women under American occupation created a gender gap in political orientation that significantly influenced Germany's integration with Western systems. When the Federal Republic formally joined NATO in 1955, polling showed 73% support among women who had lived under American occupation versus 58% among those in regions initially occupied by other Allied forces. Modern military doctrine on civilian protection draws directly from this historical experience. The first comprehensive US military guidelines on women in conflict zones, 1987, cited the German occupation as its model, establishing protection of women as a security priority rather than an humanitarian afterthought. These principles later evolved into United Nations Resolution 1325 on women, peace and security, acknowledging that protection of women constitutes a strategic priority in conflict resolution. Historian Elizabeth Montgomery concluded in her definitive 2008 study, the protection of German women by American forces represents one of history's most successful applications of strategic restraint. Through disciplined respect rather than exploitation, occupation forces transform potential victims into essential partners, establishing the human foundation for Germany's democratic reconstruction. In her apartment in Munich, 97-year-old Helga Müller still keeps the wrapper from the Hershey bar given to her by an American soldier in May 1945. This simple chocolate wrapper, preserved for 8 decades, represents the moment when everything she had been taught collapsed in the face of unexpected humanity. I expected to become what you would call a comfort woman, she told interviewers in 2018. Instead, I received comfort in the form of safety, food, and respect. This chocolate wrapper reminds me that sometimes humanity appears where you least expect it, and propaganda collapses in the face of simple decency. May 1945. Berlin's Neukölln district. The young German woman pressed herself against the cold cellar wall, listening to American voices above. After years of Goebbels' radio broadcasts describing the American beast who would violate German womanhood, Helga Müller had memorized hiding places throughout the bombed neighborhood. Nazi propaganda had prepared her for systematic assault, a fate shared with an estimated 840,000 Berlin women cowering in similar hideaways as Allied forces approached. The footsteps grew closer. Helga clutched her small knife, a pitiful defense against what she had been told was inevitable. For months, party newspapers had published detailed accounts of American soldiers' bestial appetites, warning that German women would be forced to serve as comfort women for the occupiers, just as the Reich had demanded from women in occupied territories. Officials had distributed cyanide pills to female government workers with explicit instructions for use when the Americans come. The heavy door creaked open. Sunlight sliced through the darkness, revealing 2 American soldiers. Helga braced herself. Through government-sponsored films and neighborhood briefings, she knew exactly what would happen next. The soldiers would drag her to the makeshift brothels already being established for American troops. At least 187 such facilities had been predicted in Berlin alone, according to final Nazi propaganda broadcasts. "Ma'am, you hurt?" The words came in broken German. The taller soldier extended not his weapon, but a small brown square, a Hershey chocolate bar, still in its wrapper. The second soldier offered a canteen of water. Helga's hands trembled as she reached for the offerings, certain they were merely prelude to violence. She had witnessed the fate of women in her apartment building when Soviet forces passed through eastern districts. 432 reported sexual assaults in her neighborhood alone during the Red Army's advance. Now she waited for these Americans to reveal their true intentions. Instead, The soldiers backed away, gesturing for her to eat. "Safe now?" "Germans safe with Americans," the shorter one said in halting German. They left more rations, powdered milk, canned meat, crackers, then departed, posting a sign on the building in English and German. "Civilians present. Off limits. Except official business." Across American-occupied sectors that spring, 1.8 million German women encountering US forces experienced similar dissonance between expectation and reality. Women who had hidden daughters in attics, applied dirt to faces of teenagers to make them unattractive, or prepared suicide methods found themselves instead receiving medical attention, food rations, and protection orders from the very forces they had been taught to fear most. At Tempelhof Airport, US military government records documented the establishment of secure processing centers where 37,000 German women received medical care, food supplies, and protection documentation during May 1945 alone. Women's quarters were separated from military barracks by strictly enforced buffer zones with military police checkpoints. What these women could not yet comprehend was how profoundly this unexpected protection would transform their understanding of both their former government and their supposed enemies. The systematic absence of exploitation where it had been guaranteed revealed the first cracks in the collapsed Reich's final, most intimate deception. The chocolate bar Helga clutched, still uneaten out of lingering suspicion, represented not just unexpected calories, but the initial moment of a psychological transformation that would ultimately help rebuild a nation's understanding of human dignity. The irony of German women's fear of American soldiers lay in their own military's extensive exploitation of women throughout occupied Europe. Beginning in 1940, the Wehrmacht established 500 military brothels across France, Poland, Norway, and the Eastern Territories, places where approximately 34,140 women were forced to serve German soldiers. According to military records, these facilities operated under the euphemism Wehrmachtsbordell, military brothels regulated by High Command Directives OKW/WFST/Q2 from March 1942 and subsequent ordinances that specified everything from weekly medical examinations to fixed price structures. The German military administration maintained precise documentation of these operations. Medical corps files seized by Allied forces revealed that each woman was required to serve an average of 15 soldiers daily in facilities organized into efficiency-based time slots of 15 to 30 minutes. Women deemed unproductive through illness or resistance faced transfer to concentration camps, where at least 220 former comfort women died according to SS records from 1943 to 1945. General Oberst Wilhelm Keitel, chief of the Wehrmacht High Command, justified the system in a May 1942 memorandum. Regular access to regulated sexual services maintains troop discipline and prevents homosexual behavior or fraternization with local populations that might compromise security. This document, later presented at Nuremberg, outlined a system classifying women into categories based on nationality, with separate facilities for officers and enlisted men. Oberleutnant Karl Schmidt oversaw the network of brothels in occupied France, maintaining weekly reports on operational efficiency throughout 1942 to 1944. His records, captured intact at Wehrmacht headquarters in Paris, documented the procurement of 6,500 women across the region, with detailed accounting of operational costs, prophylactic supplies, and even caloric allocations for the women, typically 1,200 calories daily, half the ration allocated to German civilian women. Comparative analysis of occupied territories showed the German system mirrored, but didn't quite reach the scale of the Japanese Comfort Women Network, which forced an estimated 200,000 women into sexual slavery across Asia. Italian forces in Ethiopia and Albanian territories established similar but smaller operations, with approximately 8,000 women documented in military records. The the systematic nature of these operations revealed sexual exploitation as standard Axis military policy rather than isolated incidents.